The NFL Coaching Carousel is spinning. We're reacting to it today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Crabbs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who never miss a single episode, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets if you win or lose your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started.
Joe, happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday.
Happy 2-hour delay Tuesday to you.
You know, just because it's cold. It's 17 degrees in Charlotte. We can't go anywhere. What do you guys got? A foot of snow?
It was 14 degrees and 6 inches of snow throughout the day yesterday and 16 degrees this morning. We had 2-hour delay. So
is there a snowman in your yard? You got igloos? What do you got?
Yeah. Well, no, snowman. I did the driveway and the cars last night at 8, and then it spontaneously snowed for another 2 hours, and the whole thing got undone. So I was not thrilled about that. But
what do you mean by the driveways and the cars? That's something you got to do. You got to shovel that and scrape them.
Yeah, your property. You got to make sure that there's no snow on your sidewalk, or it's a fall risk, and the HOA gets real mad at you. You know all about that kind of stuff.
No, right? I don't know about those logistics. I mean, when it snows in North Carolina, well, the rule is you don't do anything. You don't.
Yeah, what's the rule when it snows in Buffalo, New York?
I mean, I think you do have to shovel your driveway
and
your sidewalk. Yeah,
right. You get your snowmobile and you go to the gas station. Fill up the gas
tank. Living in the North Pole.
Hey, you get the igloo, or you get the Iditarod sled set up with the dogs, and you go down to the corner store and buy a new shovel, and that's what we did this morning.
Hey, you get your Huskies. Yeah, can you rent them, or you just raise them in your backyard?
You just keep them. Yeah, you get a spot in the backyard for them. So, happy Tuesday, NFL Coaching Carousel spinning away. We're reacting to some of the early developments. There's been some coordinators, but we're going to mainly focus on head coaching vacancies of who's going, who's staying, what the surprises are, and then some favorite fits that we have for some of the openings that we know about this far, Joe.
So I guess we've only had 2 new firings, right? We had the 3.
Doug was fired.
Right. So it doesn't feel like anything's happened.
Right.
The Patriots fired Jerod Mayo.
Yes.
What's your impressions there? I mean, I think we've been pretty critical of Jerod Mayo for a while.
Yeah.
Whether it's been the just odd messaging, lack of congruency between what he says and what happens. I think his in-game decisions have been an issue. I've not been impressed, but I think generally speaking, most people would say we're not really into one and done coaches. Do you think that this was warranted?
I think it's a raw deal to have been pegged as the heir to Bill Belichick for 4 years and get 1 year with a team that stunk before he even took over.
Who was the coach with the Texas Longhorns, the defensive coach that was always supposed to replace Mac Brown, that he went to Florida? Come on, you know this guy. And then he went to South Carolina. Who's this head coach?
No.
Yelled at everybody. Come on, man.
I just heard Florida to South Carolina pipeline and thought Steve Spurrier.
No, man. Come on.
Will Muschamp. Muschamp.
That guy. Yes, it was just like that. He was supposed to succeed Mac Brown, and then anyways, go ahead. So that's what it reminded me of, but go ahead.
So I sympathize for Jerod Mayo in that regard, because I don't think he had much of a puncher's chance to get this thing turned around. As a young coach, I think you do look at the job that he did, and you're alarmed that, having been a part of the Patriot way for so long, a lot of easily avoidable mistakes and disconnections and poor messaging. So I have to imagine, if I were a betting man, and I may or may not be a betting man in this regard, The Patriots made this change because they knew they had a candidate that they had their eyes on that has a connection to the franchise that they were intent on probably targeting to be the next head coach of the team. I know we're doing favorite fits for openings in segment 3, but this feels like to me, candidate X is available. We feel really good about our chance to get him, and we might not get him again. So we're just going to fall on the sword with Jerod Mayo, which is not fair at all to Jerod Mayo. So, like, I do sympathize for Jerod Mayo in a big deal while also acknowledging, like, if we're going to be constructively critical, he did not do a particularly good job this year.
Well, and Elliot Wolf had some pretty candid comments about how they expected player development to be better, specifically highlighting Jalen Polk as a guy, or Jalen Polk. Sorry, somebody yelled at me for the way I said Jalen. They'd say it's Jalen. Why do you say it Jalen? Jalen Polk, they said that he would be a plug-and-play receiver, and that really didn't happen, which was kind of interesting.
I think you missed that evaluation based on what I thought about Polk at Washington.
Right.
I'm not surprised one bit. That was a quiet year, but that's okay. Okay. Somebody's got to take the blame, right?
Yeah, and I guess on one hand you can appreciate, like, if somebody's not your guy and the messaging is bad and you just don't feel like there's a path forward, like, the worst thing you can do is just let it play out because you want to let it play out.
Right.
But if the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow here is Mike Vrabel, I certainly understand it. I feel like if you're going to fire your coach, like, make sure you can get a better one. And so if you don't think you're going to want to give the time to Jerod Mayo, it feels like Mike Vrabel's an obvious choice.
Man, I just really wish he would have done a better job developing an offensive line that had Demontre Jacobs as their second highest snap taker for the season on offense. You know, he's shame on Jerod Mayo for not developing him and Vidarian Lowe and Michael Jordan and
Caden Wallace. Like, can we also talk about
Brown
that? Your plan for tackle was Caden Wallace and Chuks Okorafor.
Yeah, dude. Like, give me a break with the player developments. I don't buy that for one.
Your plan for receiver was Pop Douglas and Keyshawn Butte and Kendrick Bourne off of an ACL
and left what? Opposite of Keon White. No, Josh Uche, who you got so tired of you couldn't stand and traded for peanuts.
Dietrich Wise.
Give me a break with the player development thing. I don't buy that for a minute.
In fact, I think the bigger thing is you look at the defensive talent and it regressed. Duggar regressed in a big way this year. You know, I think good for Keon White to develop, but like, that defense was objectively better last year. And you had a full season of Gonzalez.
They missed far more.
Sure, but they got Gonzalez.
Yeah.
I don't know. It shouldn't have been this bad defensively. So
I think that's a better justification for dismissing Mayo is like, dude, this is your background.
Yeah.
And this group got way worse.
Yeah. I guess the other job that came free was the Jaguars, right? They have officially fired Doug Pederson. Jaguars. What did I say? Wires?
Yeah, you gave him the wire.
Jeez. Pronunciation. I'm toast. I'm going to go to prison by the pronunciation police. So this felt like a formality. I thought it was interesting to listen to the press conference. I listened to a good amount of it with Shad Khan and Trent Baalke. And I came away with a lot of questions about Shad Khan and how he sees things and how he chooses to go about things. I thought there was a lot of goofy, man.
Trent Baalke has sold him that this is the most talented roster on the face of the planet.
He said that. Dude, he said that before the year, that this is the best team ever assembled.
It's the best roster they've ever had. And then said what after the season in talking about it, the too predictable. That was that
was a big thing. It was predictable on both sides. What?
Yeah. Now, do I think Jacksonville had a roster that should have yielded a 4-13 season? No,
absolutely not.
I think their talent was better than that.
Right.
And if you want to get into the lack of what a major leap from Trevor Lawrence, I think that's totally fair. And I know he got banged up and missed the last stretch of the season, but he was brought there to fix Trevor in large part, and that never really happened. So I get it. But like the personnel decisions how many times we're going to talk about the Gabe Davis contract as just a great embodiment?
I'm happy to discuss it if you like.
I am sure you are. It's a team that's in an awkward spot because I do feel like they are more talented than what they should have been. So you could justify a coaching change, especially they underachieved. But Jacksonville's done this for forever. I remember doing a blame game for our previous place like 5 years ago, writing a story about half resets with Jacksonville and Shad Khan. They've been doing half resets forever.
Yeah.
And now you're doing it again with Bulky. And it just that's
Bulky.
Yeah, it's
with
tough.
Bulky.
Yeah. That's
gonna make it difficult for their hiring process, which we'll obviously talk about later on.
Figure that out in segment 3.
Yeah.
First, we got to do segment 2.
Yeah, some teams keeping coaches. So many actually issued statements that they're keeping their coaches. So we'll talk about that here. On the other side of it, folks, be sure to stick with us. It's playoff time, and if you're like me, you want to make the most of these final weeks of football action. That's where Prize Picks comes in. If you love football and want a chance to win real money while watching the games, Prize Picks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. With Prize Picks, you simply pick more or less on player stats, like total passing yards or rushing touchdowns, and for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds, and whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or want to cash out quickly, Prize Picks has got you covered. And with over 10 million members and billions in winnings, it's clear that people are loving this platform. I've been playing for a while now, and I'm having a blast. It's so easy to use, and I love how fast the payouts are. Seriously, I've gotten paid out in as little as 15 minutes when my picks hit. Plus, the weekly promos like Taco Tuesday discounts add even more value to my lineups. Here's a special offer for Locked On NFL listeners. Download the app today and use code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today. Use code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game.
All right.
I want to start with the Colts. Start with the Colts, man, they're keeping Steichen and Chris Ballard. And Kyle, this feels to me like Jim Irsay is intentionally saying that, Pat McAfee, you do not run the Indianapolis Colts. That's what this feels like to me, because I don't know how you reconcile Chris Ballard's resume as the general manager of this team, where the most important thing you have to do as a GM is to get a quarterback. And this guy has had chance after chance after chance, not only players that he brought in and weren't good, but the players that he chose not to pursue and the times he chose not to draft quarterbacks. I think the resume is not worthy of continuing the course. And then Shane Steichen, I mean, obviously massive collapses the last couple of years, coupled with the messaging that you're hearing from Kenny Moore and DeForest Buckner. Those are the dudes with the Colts coming in and talking about accountability and issues like that. What are we doing here, man? And then we talked about it last week about the whole, like, not everybody can be on time. I think it tells you everything you need to know about Shane Steichen and if he's actually a leader of men. Combined with the resume of Chris Ballard, I'm very disappointed in Jim Irsay for continuing to put his fans through this because they're stuck in mediocrity. They're absolutely stuck.
Yeah, 9-8, 4-12-1, 9-8, 8-9. The last 4 years for the Colts. And the ceiling there's tough, where you had the Phillip Rivers year, and then the year before that was 7-9. So this is an extended period now. I understand you don't want to fire a coach after 2 years. Shane Steichen, you like some of the game management type stuff. It felt like they were aggressive in the right kind of spots this past year as a team. But the Ballard experience certainly feels like it has run its course. And maybe the thought process is, because I think that's what you really have to get down to is what's the path to justification for the decision? If you're going to ride Anthony Richardson this year, do you figure and tie all of those figures together within your organization? Because they're not in a position to draft a replacement, or at least they don't figure to be in a position to draft a replacement. The market's not particularly good. They have what's going to be a third-year player that only had a handful of starts, clearly needs to develop as a player. My question is, do you just feel as though Anthony Richardson, Shane Steichen, and Chris Ballard are all tied together, and I don't want to bring a bunch of new people in and preempt that potential development or put them in a spot where they're handcuffed with that player that they don't want, or miss out on, moving on from Anthony Richardson a year too early?
I think that's valid, and I think maybe one of the most compelling arguments that any team that chose to keep their coach could make is that I don't know that there's a great pool of candidates right now. And so I can certainly understand that thought process. I just feel like this was more intentional about stiff-arming Pat McAfee than it was actually evaluating the situation and doing what's best for the Colts.
I mean, Jim wrote a novel. That was like some people had some like vote of confidence.
Yeah.
The standard needs to be higher, but we're committed to the division that we have with these people. They'll be back. And that's it. And then Jim had what Jim had.
Yeah, he had two graphics full of information. I had to push the over button to read the whole thing.
That was like that meme. I'm not reading all that. Sorry or congratulations.
Right. The Giants are they're keeping Shane and Daboll. And
this is less justifiable than the Colts, in my opinion. And I get, like, you've been on the Brian Daboll already has broken the curse of the New York Giants 2-year head coaching experience, because it was McAdoo was 2 years and Shermer was 2 years and Joe Judge was 2 years. And those are the last 3 coaches you had before Daboll. But this team's gone from 9-6 to 3 wins the last 3 years. The roster, what are we clinging to? A top 10 pick at wide receiver that we drafted and hit out of the park because it was a top 10 pick.
It was a hard pick, man. A lot of people would have known to pick Malik Neighbors. It wasn't a very good prospect, right?
Also, you could have used one of those spots to pick any of these quarterbacks that look great.
Yeah. It didn't have to be Drake May or bust, right?
Right.
For them.
And that's evidenced by looking at how some of these quarterbacks look. McCarthy looked great in the preseason. Bo Nix got the Broncos in the playoffs. I thought they were going to turn into a pumpkin at the midnight hour, and he played maybe his best game of the season.
Penix elevated the Falcons as well.
Yeah. So what? We hit this year's draft class with Malik Neighbors and Tyrone Tracy out of the park, and I don't know, this is, from a talent perspective, they spent on the offensive line like crazy this year. Not crazy. I mean, crazy. They didn't give out like market reset contracts, but they invested a lot in the offensive line to get it right.
Yeah.
And is this just as simple as, we don't have a quarterback? Okay, if that's the case, then look at the class you just bypassed and the shoes that you're in now, and you want a Week 17 game that maybe puts you outside of the strike zone of the top 2 guys.
Yeah, they're third, right? Third
yes.
pick. I think there's a unique layer to this Giants conversation, and it's that we did get a chance to see the offseason with Hard Knocks. And I think people came away with questions about Joe Shane, and I think that's warranted. I think if you've observed Brian Daboll as well, you just kind of wonder, like, does this guy have the temperament? Is this the steady hand, the poise, the charisma that I'm looking for to be the head coach of my football team? I think, this guy's pretty animated to the point where you just wonder about his poise. And the way that he shows up players on the sidelines, the way things he says in press conferences, I wonder if that temperament's helpful for a team, particularly a young team that's been trying to build, and what that's meant. And there's some good talent on the roster in certain spots, but there's plenty of questions here, and they get another year. We'll see what happens with it. And you can't feel good because Washington, they're in the playoffs. The Eagles look like they're going to be just fine.
Dallas will be back. I mean, Dallas was better this year than the Giants, and they had a lot of problems themselves. So it doesn't feel like there's a very clear path to the Giants getting out of the NFC East cellar. I would agree.
Is that it? Is there
anybody else you want to?
Miami issued their statement, right? So that they at least
got a statement. Yep.
So that would be all 3 teams that issued a statement. Obviously, the first time in 3 years under McDaniel, they didn't make the playoffs. They got out of a 2-6 hole, gave themselves a chance in Week 18. I think this is what I would say about Miami is I feel like a lot of the questions, not all, a lot of the questions that we've had for since McDaniel took over the job, we still have them. And that's where I would point to a lack of growth that would concern me about things being different in future years.
So I think here's the hindrance that the Dolphins have had is they took over Mike McDaniel took over in the peak window of a rebuild effort.
Yeah. And
they had a 9-8 team that would have won probably 12 games if Tua didn't miss all the games he missed with concussions in 2022. That might have been their best team out of this 3-year window. And then last year happened where they won 11-6. But you had the year one, like the offensive explosion in year one, and you made the playoffs. And then the quarterback stays healthy in year two. So where is the motivation to really continue to press and probe and look at all the things within your organization to continue to make changes? I think complacency in a lot of spots was what bit the Dolphins in the butt this year. And that's complacency from a personnel standpoint. That's complacency with a problems in how you manage games. Like who is the person in Mike McDaniel's ears telling him to throw challenge flags? Joey's 4-19 in 3 years for challenges. He's just wasting timeouts. The game management stuff, Tua's been begging to get up to the line of scrimmage earlier. They only started doing that the final 2 months of the season this year.
Yeah, they've been their pace of play has been like towards the bottom of the league, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So like things like that, I think they have enough win justification early on to say, hey, let's keep doing what we're doing in these spots and then just try to like tinker the roster. And then they kind of hit like the first wave of your rookie contracts from your max like draft effort came and you couldn't re-sign everybody. So you had to make some personnel decisions, but you traded for some players with big contracts. So it complicated last year's like cap perspective. But I think a lot of the little things in Miami is like what has flown under the radar and been taken for granted that in giving them this chance, you talk about justifying the pathway to success. And I would have made a change at GM personally. I think you needed a counterbalance set of ideas there and a new set of eyes, but it's a chance for them to put everything under the microscope and look at what the systemic failures were this year that they've probably been complacent at because they had winning seasons the first 2 seasons.
I have a thought on Chris Grier in the GM position that I'll share on the other side of it. We'll talk about favorite fits as well for some of these openings. Be sure to stick with us. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. One of my favorite memories last year was attending a concert. The energy and excitement were unforgettable. Now Game Time has made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, Game Time Picks. This feature filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Recently, I was looking for tickets to an upcoming concert using the Game Time app. And with Game Time Picks, I found amazing deals and could even see the view from my seat before buying. The super deal was particularly impressive, offering great seats at unbeatable prices. Plus, the app's all-in pricing shows the total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time.
We woo, Joseph Marino. Woo.
Okay.
It has been quite the hour for the Reese Senior Bowl for talent added for this year's roster.
All right, we got a good one.
We got several good ones. Emory Jones, right tackle, LSU Tigers.
LSU, yeah.
Marcus Mbao, offensive
Purdue?
tackle, Purdue. I think he's a center.
Okay.
But people think he play all over.
So is he this year's Skoronski, Graham Barton?
Yeah, but he's built really different than those guys.
Slater type guy.
He moves crazy good. Mason Taylor, Jason Taylor's son, tight end LSU, and Armand Membu, right tackle Missouri.
Seen that name in some mock drafts.
And Jonah Saavania.
Oh, yeah.
Arizona.
Tackle. Very
Guard.
good.
Guard.
Offensive lineman. Sorry, Kyle Crabbs. Sorry.
So, yeah, 4 really good day 1, day 2 offensive line candidates added to this year's Senior Bowl roster in the last hour.
The thought that I had on the Chris Grier situation before we get into fits for openings, and I know that obviously hindsight analysis is always a lot easier, and I don't think that the Dolphins made a huge mistake in not bringing back Christian Wilkins and Robert Hunt. But when I do kind of look at the overall resume of players that left, it does include Robert Hunt. It does include Christian Wilkins. It includes Andrew Van Ginkel. It includes Brandon Jones. And I think one of the questions about Miami has just been, what type of resiliency, what type of toughness does this football team have? And those are all really tough dudes. Like, those are objectively players, like whatever you think about it, like those are like guys that are going to be culture pieces for a football team. And I think, like I said, benefit of hindsight, at least Van Ginkel and Jones, I start to wonder, like, was that the right choice with those players? So that's kind of my thought.
Jones was tough because he was coming off of a year where he had an ACL the year before and did not play well.
Right, and it was a weird scheme for him, right?
Yes,
with Vic.
Like his best his most notable contributions in 2023 was like
hitting other guys,
hitting his own guys,
right,
getting his own teammates hurt.
Yeah.
But he's played great in Denver this year, and Van Ginkel obviously, and their pivot there was Shaq Barrett, who retired on him.
Yeah, that didn't work.
And Christian Wilkins, Calais Campbell. I'll say this too, with the amount of roster turnover and those guys that you mentioned, a lot of them were like significant leaders on that team. They had kind of a power and leadership vacuum early in the season. And everybody in exit interviews talked about, like, Mike McDaniel needs to have a larger leadership and accountability presence. But Mike's kind of school of thought, at least through this year, was we're going to defer that leadership to the players. When 40% of the roster is different, even if it's a guy like Calais Campbell, even if it's a guy like Jordan Poyer, who's kind of been around the block a bunch of times. Some of what I had heard was that, like, there was new players in the building trying to engage in having hard conversations about how to do something or accountability and hold each other accountable. And like, it was an awkward dynamic because players that had been here being like, I've been here, you just got here type thing.
Yeah.
And that kind of blew up in their face too.
Yeah. It's interesting. I not to like bring the Bills into this, but they lost 8 captains. 6 of their 8 captains they lost last year. They only chose to have 2 captains this year: Terrell Bernard and Josh Allen. That's it. It's
interesting. That's the little stuff like that. That's
define your leadership, right?
Yeah, that's very interesting and a fun nugget. So,
and the Dolphins had 8, 10,
8, I think,
some kind of crazy number. And I remember, like, at the beginning of the season, there was discourse. It's like, oh, the Bills only have 2 captains, and the Dolphins have this many. And I'm not trying to like get into anything here, but I think it's interesting. Like, one team chose to like very much transition and define their leadership, and they have a leadership council. But it was like, oh wow, we're sitting here predicting who the captains are going to be. It's 2. It's Bernard and Allen.
Yeah.
And so I think when you define that, they're based on that team that year. It could mean different things, and I think that kind of worked.
Yeah.
Okay, favorite fits for openings. It feels like the hot names are Vrabel and Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson. You're seeing Joe Brady's had some opportunities. Anything you like? Matt Nagy's interviewing for jobs.
Yeah,
Rex Ryan.
So you can put me down for Mike Vrabel in New England. I think that one's a shoo-in.
Right.
With the connection to the organization, and Jerod Mayo still very clearly clinging to the remnants of the Patriot way. And this is the best way for him to do that. Right? Yep. All right. So next vacancy that we want to have is Jacksonville.
Let me make a comment here.
Yeah.
What's really interesting about all of these vacancies is that only one of them comes without the GM staying, and that's the Jets. Every other vacancy, the GM is staying.
Yeah. Do you think we get any other ones? Do you think like McCarthy goes through his contract negotiation with Dallas and is like, I'm not going to resign? And then like, does Chicago hold out for that? If McCarthy hits the market, I would love McCarthy in Chicago.
That was such an interesting thing that came through about Chicago having some interest in Mike McCarthy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't not like that for Chicago. That seems reasonable to me.
It's kind of more Mike McCarthy's speed too, obviously, like being a coach in the NFC North for an extended period of time.
Yeah, it kind of feels right. I don't know. There's a part of me that is intrigued by Brian Flores in Chicago. I just think there's an interesting. Okay, you're nixing that real quick.
No, him and Caleb Williams.
Exactly why I want it.
Why? To watch the world burn.
I think that there's a they need some culture there in Chicago, man.
Here's the thing I'd say about Brian Flores. I have a great deal of respect for Brian Flores, the football coach, and the time that he's spent since the last time that he was a head football coach. He's talked candidly about what he learned through that experience. There would be no opening that would greater test the lessons that Brian Flores has learned
than Chicago.
Yeah. Now, if you told me you want to have an edge and he knows Minnesota and with hard-nosed team like Detroit at the top of the mountain at 15-2, and you need some of that and you're trying to chase down Big Brother in Green Bay, who like you won what frankly became a meaningless game for Green Bay, but you still won the game to snap the 10-game losing streak. Okay, but I just like to have a little bit more confidence in what the stability is going to be like for like who is Caleb Williams working with? What does the offensive staff look like? And that's what I get worried about if you're going to hire Brian Flores there.
What about Marcus Freeman? I know he's defensive minded, but
stop bringing up Marcus Freeman. He's not leaving Notre Dame. But he would be at the top of my list if I would be requesting to interview Marcus Freeman.
Okay.
They got Penn State what in 2 days?
Yeah.
We'll see. Do you have another fit for one of the other vacancies that you like?
Yeah, for the Jets, because I think you have this is the one GM head coach spot. I think this is where you go Aaron Glenn, Ray Agnew. I'd love that combination going to the Jets. Like you need like toughness and like culture. Come on, man. Aaron Glenn, former player, his best years came with the Jets. This is the one place where he can bring Ray Agnew with him. I think that'd be a slam dunk for the Jets. And boy, I hope they go with Ryan Grigson and Rex Ryan instead.
I'll see what influence I have over at 33rd team.
Yeah, could you put in a word?
Yeah, I'll see what I can do.
What do I do?
I have no control over that whatsoever.
I'm going to send you an email.
New Orleans.
I can't even take this job seriously. I hate that I feel this way about it. But with Mickey Loomis staying, with no quarterback, with no assets, like this feels like a coach that's going to get hired just to get fired. I'd be sad if I hope Joe Brady becomes an NFL head coach, but boy, if it's there, that'd be so disappointing.
All right, so the Saints have requested interviews for Weaver from Miami, Glenn from Detroit, Brady from the Bills, Kellen Moore from the Eagles, Mike Kafka, Darren Rizzi.
It's a different list than the other teams, Kyle.
Right.
Well, who can you get? Like, does this have to be the Leslie Frazier team?
It's a tough sell on this job.
It's 1 of 32, but man, you just don't have a lot to work with here, and you're stuck with Mickey Loomis.
Yeah. I don't have a favorite fit there. That's going to do it for us here on Locked On NFL Scouting. Kyle Crabbs, Joe Marino. Appreciate you guys, as always, for checking out the show. You can make it a part of your daily routine. We are with you every day, your teams every day, covering the NFL offseason, team building across the league. And we hope to see you all back here tomorrow. Kyle Crabbs, Joe Marino, Locked On NFL Scouting. Have a good rest of your day.